You've heard it 1,000 times. There's no point in trying to fool a Taurus, but no one has ever really explained why. And the answer has nothing to do with distrust, stubbornness, or that hard-headedness that everyone associates with Taurus. There is an instrument within the Taurus body, silent, always on, that senses the lie even before it is finished being told. It is not intuition in the mystical sense, it is memory. A sensory memory so precise that it recognizes the true weight of a promise fulfilled and feels, almost physically, the instant when something changes its intention. But here's the detail no one mentions. Sensing a lie and accepting that it's a lie have never been the same thing for a Taurus. And it's precisely in this interval, between the body that already knows and the mind that still resists, that lies the real explanation for why this sign detects things so quickly and takes so long to admit what it has already detected. Imagine a dam holding back a crack that appeared long ago. On the outside, everything looks the same, solid, in place, but inside, the water has already changed course. The body already knows that something is no longer what it seemed, but admitting this would mean accepting that something built with such care no longer supports the weight it should. And that's exactly why there are so many stories of Taurus individuals who took too long to leave a place that their own bodies had already abandoned long ago. What follows isn't about distrusting the world more. It's about understanding why the same root that protects Taurus from deception is also the one that most strongly holds on to the hope of being wrong about what it has already felt. Imagine a precision scale installed inside your chest. It never makes mistakes. It senses the difference of a gram, half a gram, almost nothing. But there's a detail that changes everything. Registering the wrong weight isn't the same as deciding to take it off the table. And that's exactly where the second layer of this story lies, the one almost no one sees from the outside. Because while the Taurus body has already made its verdict long ago, a part of it keeps returning to the same place to check again. Not out of naivete, out of a kind of hope that insists on existing even after the proof is right there, in front of you, clear as a cloudless day. From the outside, one only sees the Taurus who took too long to leave, who accepted excuse after excuse, who seemed oblivious to the obvious. But inside, the scene is completely different. There is no blindness at all. There is a silent verification happening all the time, a second check, a third, a fourth, each one trying to find a different result from the one already felt at the beginning. And it is precisely this pattern, this insistence on confirming again what the body already knew, that explains why one of the signs most difficult to deceive can also be, at the same time, one of those that takes the longest to admit that the body already, I knew it. And it is precisely this interval between what the body confirms and what the mouth cannot yet say that makes so many Taurus people live for years within a question that already had an answer. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book. The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose talks about this interval, about transforming the keen perception that Taurus already carries in its body into a security that no longer depends on constantly checking. It's not a book about distrusting the world more. It's about trusting first in what you already feel, without needing another proof, another chance. For those who spend so much energy building security on the outside, it shows how to build the same solidity on the inside. If you've made it this far, feeling a tightness in your chest, recognizing a situation, a face, a voice that has shifted in weight, and you've chosen not to admit it, that's no coincidence. It's your body trying once again to be heard. And the longer this call goes unanswered, the more it repeats itself in other areas of life, silently demanding the same attention you've been postponing. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, This content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And leave a comment below. What was the moment when your body knew before your mind accepted it? There's an image that explains this gap between feeling and accepting better than any theory. A dam. The water found the crack long ago. It already knows exactly where it will leak when the pressure gets too great. But on the outside, the structure remains standing, solid, as if nothing were happening. That's how it works inside Taurus. When something breaks prematurely, the body has already registered the crack, already felt the water changing course. But the dam holds, because collapsing would mean admitting that what it trusted wasn't what it seemed. And the reason for this resistance is not weakness, it's construction. Taurus builds each relationship, each trust, each bond like someone building a stone house, brick by brick, year after year. To tear it all down at once, just because the body felt a crack, seems like too great a waste of everything that was built with so much care. So the dam learns to live with the crack. It learns to redistribute the weight, to reinforce here, to ignore there, just so it doesn't have to admit that the structure is already compromised from within. There's a curious detail about this type of resistance. The more solid the dam seems on the outside, the more it costs to build on the inside. Taurus doesn't build trust quickly, so when it finally gives that trust to someone, it's as if it's handing over years of effort, of bricks laid with patience, of cement that needed to dry slowly so it wouldn't crack. That's why admitting a crack in this structure is never a simple gesture. It's almost an anticipatory mourning, the mourning of accepting that part of what took so long to build no longer supports the weight it should. And while this grief isn't acknowledged aloud, the dam continues to function automatically. The water continues to be dammed, the routine remains the same, the gestures continue as always. But inside, silently, the Taurus body has already reorganized much of the trust that once existed effortlessly. It still delivers on its daily tasks, still keeps its promises, still shows stability, but a part of it is already calculating, in the background, what to do when the crack finally becomes too big to ignore. If you've recognized this dam within yourself, holding back a crack you've felt for a long time just to avoid collapsing everything you've built, you need to know that there's a way to strengthen this structure from within, without denying what your body already knows. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose addresses exactly this transition. How Taurus can acknowledge a crack without feeling destroyed by it, transforming it into real solidity, not a pretense of solidity. This content may be taken down at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But every dam has a limit, and it is precisely at this point that the next pattern is born, perhaps the most silent of all within the Taurus mechanics, the second check. Before accepting that the crack is definitive, Taurus returns, checks again, gives it another chance, observes once more, waits just a little longer to see if this time the result changes. It's not naivete, it's a kind of structural, almost physical hope that insists on existing even when the proof is already there, in front of you, clear as a cloudless day. Imagine someone tightening a screw they already know won't hold. Their hand keeps turning the wrench, even sensing the thread is worn, because stopping seems more frightening than continuing. This invisible movement explains so many stories of Tauruses who stayed longer than they should have, who accepted excuse after excuse, who seemed oblivious to the obvious while, deep down, a part of them had already made up their minds from the start. The question that remains is simple and unsettling at the same time. How many times do you have to tighten the same screw before accepting that it will never hold again? There is something profoundly human in this insistence. Job, in the biblical tradition, refused for entire chapters to accept the easy version his friends offered about his suffering. He insisted on questioning, on turning his own pain inside out, on searching again and again for a meaning that would make the accounts balance. It wasn't empty stubbornness, it was the refusal to accept an answer that was too simple for a wound that was too complex. Taurus carries this same kind of insistence. It doesn't accept the first explanation, it doesn't accept the first sign, because it knows, deep down, that admitting too early might mean giving up prematurely on something that still deserved to be saved. But there is a line, almost invisible, between insisting out of faith in something real and insisting out of fear of facing what is already dead. And it is precisely on this line that Taurus's next challenge lies. Recognizing when the second check, the third, the fourth, have ceased to be hope and have become merely a sophisticated way of postponing the inevitable. That hand that keeps turning the key, even feeling the worn screw, is the most honest image of how much Taurus strives not to give up on what they've already built. But there's a huge difference between persisting out of love and persisting out of fear of facing the emptiness that comes after. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose helps precisely with this. It shows how Taurus can recognize when stopping tightening the screw isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and how to build enough inner abundance to let go without fear of the void. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's a tree whose roots remain firmly planted even after the surrounding soil has dried up. From the outside, it seems like senseless resistance. Everyone sees the cracked earth, the lack of water, the absence of any nutrients, and doesn't understand why that tree doesn't move, doesn't detach itself, doesn't seek another place. But roots don't think like someone observing from afar. Roots think in depth, in the time invested, in how much it costs to get there. And Taurus, more than any other sign, understands this type of root because it is made of them. Leaving a place, a relationship, a belief about someone is never simply a decision for Taurus. It's a geological process. Layer by layer, they revisit everything they've built, each season when that soil still yielded fruit, each reason that made it worthwhile to continue drawing water from increasingly dry ground. That's why, from the outside, the process seems too slow, too stubborn. But inside, each passing day is a day of silent review, of comparison between what was and what has become, of mourning happening even before the end is admitted aloud. And there's a question that runs through this entire phase, nagging softly: what happens at the exact moment when the root finally gives way? Because until that moment arrives, everything seems the same. Everything seems like pure resistance. But something changes, slowly, almost imperceptibly, in the amount of water that root is still willing to seek in a soil that no longer gives anything back. There's a subtle difference between a root that sustains life and a root that only sustains memory. In the beginning, when the soil still had water, that root fulfilled its function perfectly. It brought nutrients, supported growth, justified every inch it sank deeper into the earth. But there's a moment, difficult to date precisely, when the root stops seeking new life and begins only to preserve the memory of when there was life there. And Taurus, so connected to the idea of permanence, so often confuses the two. It confuses loyalty to the memory of what was once good with loyalty to what continues to be good now. That's why, for Taurus, leaving is never about a lack of love. It's about finally admitting that loving that specific place doesn't mean that place still has something to offer. And this distinction between loving the memory and continuing to nurture something that no longer grows is perhaps one of the most silent and least talked about internal struggles of the entire sign. And then, one day, without any warning, the moment arrives. It's not a big dramatic event full of signs. Usually it's something small, a phrase repeated for the umpteenth time, a gesture that had already happened before, a silence in the wrong place. It's the drop that no longer fits in the cup. Only the cup had been full for a long time, and no one had noticed because Taurus carries this cup with a calmness almost impossible to notice from the outside. At that moment, something reorganizes itself internally. It's not explosive anger, it's not a scene, it's not words. It's more like a shutdown, as if, finally, the body has been allowed to stop checking. The dam that held back the crack no longer holds it, not because it suddenly broke, but because it decided, after so long, that it no longer needed to pretend it was whole. And the most interesting thing is that, when this truly happens, there's rarely a way back. Because Taurus doesn't change its mind impulsively. It changes when the body finally grasps what it already knew from the beginning, and then there's no argument, excuse, or promise that can rebuild what was felt as broken. What remains after that moment is not bitterness, although from the outside it may seem so. It is a new form of strength, silenter, more definitive, almost impossible to shake again, because it was born not from anger, but from the final confirmation of something the body had been warning about for a long time. Anyone who has experienced this moment knows that it's nothing like what movies show. There's no scene, no scream, no door slamming. At most, there's a different kind of silence, heavier, more definitive, the kind of silence that only exists after a question has finally been answered. And the most curious thing is that, despite all the pain this moment carries, it also brings a strange, almost physical relief, as if an enormous weight, carried for too long, could finally be put down. It's as if the dam, after holding back the water for so long, finally accepted that cracking wasn't the end of the world. It was, in fact, the only way to let that water follow its natural course again. If you've ever experienced that silent disconnection, that moment when stopping checking became stronger than continuing to try, perhaps it's exactly time to transform that newfound strength into real direction, not just relief. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose exists for that, to help Taurus use this new inner strength to build something instead of just resting on it. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. In the end, perhaps the right question was never, why is it impossible to deceive a Taurus? Perhaps the right question is another, why is it so difficult for Taurus to quickly accept what they have already felt too quickly? Because their genius has never been in distrusting the world. It has always been in remembering the exact texture of each truth, the right weight of each fulfilled promise, the sound of a voice that never changed its intention. This memory is Taurus's true compass, and like any self-respecting iron compass, it doesn't point north because it decided to. It points because it is made of the very substance of truth. There is something profoundly biblical in this image of Jacob wrestling all night with the angel, refusing to let go until he received the blessing, because that is exactly what Taurus does with his own inner certainties. He struggles, resists, insists on checking again, not because he doubts his own perception, but because he knows the weight of what he is about to admit. And when he finally lets go, when he finally accepts what his body already knew from the first instant, what remains is not a wound. It is a tranquil, almost sacred solidity of someone who has traversed his own cracked earth and discovered, in the end, roots even deeper than he imagined. Therefore, the next time someone says it's impossible to fool a Taurus, it's worth remembering that the statement is only half correct. The Taurus body, in fact, almost never makes mistakes. What takes time is the permission it gives itself to trust what it already knows, without needing another test, another turn, another check. And perhaps that is, in the end, the most valuable lesson this sign has to teach. It's not the world that needs to prove it deserves trust. It's the person themselves who needs to learn to trust, without fear, what their body already feels so clearly. Perhaps this is the quietest beauty of Taurus. It doesn't need armor against the world, because it already carries within itself something that always knew the way, even before the mind admitted it.